Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launch their businesses. Welcome back to a new episode. I'm so excited for today's guest because this is the first time a Bright Idea podcast has ever had someone on who has pioneered innovation in healthcare. In the past, we've had founders who have created systems for easier access to healthcare for patients and a few mental health professionals, but we've never had a founder who has created a product that advanced not only the world of medicine, but mitigates risks of infections and taxing penalties to hospital systems. On this week's episode, I sat down with Amy Huser, the founder of SpigotGuard, an alcoholic cap used to disinfect and protect the drain of urine collection bags. After decades of nursing in the acute care setting, Amy Huser witnessed many changes at the bedside. None, however, has been as concerning as the decline in proper Foley catheter care. For those who are listening who are unfamiliar with a Foley catheter, it's a medical device that helps drain urine from your bladder. Healthcare providers use the Foley catheter if you have a condition that makes it difficult or impossible to urinate. You may also need a Foley catheter while your body heals from a surgery. Through direct observation, it became clear to Amy that this gap in care, specifically at the open drainage port, was contributing to patient infections. Through observations as well as supported by research, including the 1999 Mayo Clinic study on catheter-associated urinary tract infections pathogenesis, it was identified that the drain outage was a significant point of entry for bacteria. With frustration-turned research, Amy invented SpigotGuard, a global brand that is restoring a critical layer of infection prevention that has been lost at bedside. Whether you're a nurse, a patient who has experienced a tract infection in a hospital, an entrepreneur, or someone with an idea to build a prototype that could have an impact in healthcare, this episode is for you. In this episode, Amy takes us through her time as a nurse, the idea behind the invention of her product, and how she has made an impact on patients and hospital systems all over the world. Before we dive in, if you love what we're doing here at a Bright Idea podcast, help us keep going. You can subscribe to this show to get notifications when new episodes drop. If you like what you hear, share this episode with someone who needs a little inspiration. And if you would like to support the show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at a Bright Idea Podcast. Lastly, if you're a business owner or a brand looking to connect with our growing audience, we'd love to collaborate with you. You can sponsor an ad within one of our episodes or sponsor an entire episode. Just reach out to us to learn more. Now let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Amy Huser, founder of SpigotGuard. All right, Amy Huser with SpigotGuard. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to join you and talk about SpigotGuard.
I am so excited for you to be here. We talked a few weeks ago before everyone took their holiday for the winter vacation, Christmas and New Year's, and I've just been really looking forward to this conversation, and so I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's really an honor to speak with you.
Yeah. This is the first time that I've had a few people that have worked in the field of medicine and healthcare on the show before, but this is kind of the first time I've had somebody in the innovation of medicine and in this healthcare space. And so this is new territory for me, and also just something you've created a product that seems so simple, but is doing such great things. And it almost seems like, why wasn't this thought of before? And so I can't wait to get into it and learn more about your background and how you are really changing the landscape of medicine today, not just in our country, but around the world.
Yeah, thank you. I think everything that you said is accurate, and that is a very simple concept. And with respect to why hasn't it been done before, I actually have been approached by people who have said, you stole my idea.
Wow.
So I don't think it's as if no one thought of it, but there's a difference in being an entrepreneur and executing an idea, or, someone who just hangs on to an idea and it stays in their head. So a different process to take it from your head to your hand to the market. And that's what entrepreneurs do.
You know what? That's so funny that you said that because, we're in January while we're recording this episode. And January is the time where people kind of reflect on their past year and think of their New Year's resolutions. And so I've been looking on Instagram, like social media just in general. And there was this guy that said earlier today, he was like, if you don't execute that idea or go after what you want, somebody else is going to do it. And so in a perfect kind of the perfect example is what you've just mentioned. Like people are coming up to you and they're like, wait, I thought of that. And it's like, well, buddy, why didn't you do it?
Well, I didn't say that. I agreed with her that this was something that needed to be done, and she agreed as well. And that's been echoed by a couple of people. So it is a simple device. It's a simple concept. It actually is, there's an analogous product that's on the market. So we're just fortunate that we move forward with the idea to build a prototype and then move to manufacturing and actually now be making a difference in the market.
That's awesome. Well, I want to get into the prototype. I want to talk about like the impact that you're making in the world of medicine and sort of your background. But before we do that, I love to play a rapid fire to kind of loosen up a little bit and get to know you before we get into this story and your aha moment. So if you would you like to play this game with me real quick?
Love it.
Okay, here we go. So what's one nursing skill that secretly makes you a great CEO?
I think the transfer would be what I would call anticipation. So in the nursing environment, taking good care of patients, it revolves around anticipating their needs. So before they even ask, you're providing what needs to be done. And that's an important step in taking care of patients in the environment, whether you're recovering a patient from a procedure or just simply passing medicines and recognizing that they can't swallow but one pill at a time. It's just something as simple as that. So I think as a CEO, having the opportunity to anticipate what your next moves are helps to prepare your week, prepare your day, prepare your month. And that's what I try to do.
No, preparation is key. If SpigotGuard had a tagline in 3 words, what would it be?
Well, one of our taglines already is best practice made better. And what we mean by that is that we're replacing a failed honor system practice of an alcohol prep pad cleanse to the drain, and we're making it better by providing a product that performs better as far as disinfecting. And then we've added the component of protection in between drain access. So best practice made better.
I love that. What came first, the idea or the frustration that sparked it?
Frustration that sparked it. Frustration, definitely. Serving in the environment, the neglect of the catheter system in general, but in particular, noticing this very vulnerable bacterial entry point that no one was doing anything to protect the patient against the access of bacteria. So the frustration that regardless of what I did to care for the patient, if the person before me or the person after me doesn't have the same standard of care, the patient still suffers.
What the biggest adrenaline rush, solving a clinical problem or getting your first yes from a hospital?
Oh my gosh, there's been a few of those moments in this journey. I think that when I found a manufacturer who believed in me, who believed in the product, who understood the concept, that was a thrill.
And last one, in one word, what does patient safety mean to you?
Patient safety means providing tools that caregivers can use that are easy to adhere to and make adherence to best practice, easier. I think that's what patient safety means.
Mm-hmm.
You can have policy in place, but if policy isn't practiced, then failure to practice fails our patients.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, what patient safety means for me most.
And there's a great consequence for the failure of patients, which we'll get into, and how hospitals kind of are responsible for that failure of patients. We'll talk about that later on in the episode. But thank you so much for playing this game with me. Let's get into your background a little bit. Firstly, I want the listeners, the people that are listening to this episode, I want them to understand how important that this conversation is to the innovation of medicine and what you are doing not only for the industry but for patients. When I talk to entrepreneurs, I or rather, let me back up. You grew up in the industry, so your father was a physician, and you are a practicing nurse. You're not just an entrepreneur. You actually worked in this field. So take me back to your childhood and what it was like growing up in that environment.
Well, I think that early on, I just recognized that I wanted to be involved in healthcare. I wanted to be a nurse from the time I was very little. I think, as I told you earlier, that my first experience in the hospital was my dad taking me to round with him in the hospital. And must have expressed my desire so much so that my parents had actually bought me a nursing costume. And I had it and wore it to the hospital. And that was back in the day when nurses had capes and caps and everything else. So
Yeah.
it was quite the get up. And I just remember being in there with the sights and the sounds, but I think more particularly, interestingly, the smell of what the hospital smelled like to me. And it had a sense of familiarity that I knew that that's where I belonged ultimately. And from there, I volunteered at a soldier's home and a national soldier's home and took care of elderly there, pushed them in wheelchairs. It was my first wheelchair experience. And I read them letters, and I just appreciated my experience at that veterans home. And then I went on to candy striping. They don't do that anymore, but that was
Yeah.
the day where we had candy stripers assisting in the hospital by passing books and reading to children. Did a lot of pediatric experience there. And then as a high schooler, I did a co-op program my senior year where I spent half a day's training at the hospital every day, getting my CNA, which allowed me to really get a lot of experience and exposure to what happened and get closer to nursing, that experience. Took a little detour, got married, had my children, stayed at home with them, and then got back to nursing and working part-time and then full-time. And now I'm back to just a very minimal status, but I'm still at the hospital.
I really love that. Thank you for taking me through your journey. It's funny because I talk to so many entrepreneurs who have gone on so many different paths in life. Like they had one job and then they went to another job. You're sort of the expert in this field, having been in this area for this industry for so long. And you talked about the smells and the familiarity and all these people that you had kind of helped along the way as a nurse. Like, can you describe like why nursing? Like why did you, other than, your parents and sort of this is kind of runs in your DNA?
Putting yourself in the position of really exercising your compassion
Yeah.
for humans who are suffering. I think it's really not any more complex than that. That desire to get in there and help in any way that you can within the scope of your practice to make the patient experience better and more tolerable for people who are sick.
Yeah. Walk me through the day-to-day shift as a nurse because it's no undertaking at all.
I just did this Sunday. So you come in, you have an assignment, you sit down and you receive report from the offgoing nursing, staff, and do some verifications of some information. Maybe it's checking on drip rates for, IV medications that need to be double verified and things like that. And then you sit down and you just look up the history of your patients, what's happening with them, what brought them in, what is their plan of care, what are we trying to do to make them better. And then I start with just going room to room and introducing myself and doing my assessments, followed by passing meds, and then everything else that comes up in between with additional lab orders and physician directed, requests for the patient. And they're long 12-hour shifts, but they're rewarding. They're very rewarding. And at the end of the day, when you leave, you've done a good job and your tasks are complete, but not just your task list, but how you've impacted a patient's experience that day. Whether it's bringing them a warm blanket at 7:30 in the morning when you see somebody who's 90 years old curled up in a ball, recognizing she's cold.
Yeah.
You want to listen to her heart and lungs and do your assessment, but walking out to the warmer to get a warm blanket to bring it to her so that she can be more comfortable. Just little things like that.
Yeah, and there's many areas of medicine that you can work as a nurse in. Which area were you in?
So the majority of my experience has been in coronary care. So I like the heart. I like to think about how it functions. I like the medications that we use to improve things and the quality of life in patients. And I really, I shouldn't say that I enjoy a heart attack, but I enjoy recovering a patient who's had a heart attack and thinking about all the mechanisms that are in place that we've done to help them, and do what I can do to recover them to get them feeling better.
I love that. And what you just kind of walked us through in your shift, you are doing everything from checking in with patients, going through their history, talking to other doctors, like going back and forth to see other patients. And then in addition to that, you're working in an area where you may be dealing with somebody who's recovering from a heart attack, who might be hooked up to systems that you have to then, like urinary bags, is that what they're called? Urinary
fully catheters.
Fully catheters that you have to come back and check on from time to time. Like, I don't think that people are really considering the workload that it takes to be a nurse and make sure that the patients are safe in their environment.
There have been a lot of changes since I started nursing, and I think that progressively nurses in general have been asked over, the last few decades to do more with less.
Yeah.
And it used to be when I started nursing, there was a unit secretary that put all our charts together and fielded phone calls and paged out doctors and handled those kinds of things for us. There was a phlebotomy team that if you had labs that needed to be drawn, the phlebotomy team would come and take care of those for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of other systems that have disappeared, but those two come to mind, so that we are our own secretaries. We do, there used to be IV start teams. So those are gone. We start all our IVs. We do all of our labs. We make all of our phone calls. We put all of our charts together. And the expectations of all of the responsibilities that were ongoing before that never left. So always asked to do more with less. And that becomes a problem in the environment. Particularly, like I had mentioned when I said, policy isn't practice. And when practices fail, they fail our patients. And when you don't have time, you skip and you take shortcuts. And the result of that taking of a shortcut can affect the safety of the patient.
Yeah. I mean, I can think about my own experiences. I've never had a condition where I needed to be hooked up to a machine of any sort, but I can definitely attest to being in a doctor's office and there's a timer going on. It's like they only have 15 or 30 minutes at a time to talk to a patient and then they're on to the next one. I just think that, sometimes you're saying you guys are doing more with less. There's definitely a recipe for human error there, would you say?
I would completely agree. And I think that sometimes what happens is that new staff coming in who aren't, maybe trained as in depth as we were in days gone by, don't get the adequate orientation that they need to even understand all the safety measures that should be in place that are failing. And one of them is certainly the care of this drain of this urine collection bag.
When we return, Amy's experience working bedside. Let's talk about the patient for a second. How often when you were a nurse did you see that for example, you'd have a patient come in for a heart condition and they would end up with another, like a urinary infection or some sort of staph infection that had nothing to do with what they came into the hospital for, but they, as a result of not being properly cared for, they contracted something else? How often would you see that?
So I think that the experience you're describing most frequently happens in ICU settings and in like a burn center or an intensive care unit or, neuro ICUs where there are prolonged hospital stays. And there's kind of a phrase in the hospital setting, the longer you stay in the hospital, the longer you're likely to stay in the hospital because
Yeah.
more you require some kind of secondary infection that's going to overall affect your course of recovery. So it's not an uncommon phenomenon.
Mm. And can you describe some of these infections that patients may contract and like what the severity of them are?
Well, so what we're talking about is hospital-acquired infections, right? They're infections that didn't pre-exist in the patient prior to coming to the hospital, but they were acquired during their stay. And we consider those never events, right? They shouldn't happen. And so with central line infections are one of them. Hospital-related and acquired pneumonias, secondary to patients on ventilators. Certainly in the case of my product, catheter-associated urinary tract infections. These are things that aren't supposed to happen to patients while they're there.
Um, Talk to me about, well, first of all, with these tract infections, the severity. Could someone potentially, are these fatal infections?
So they can be fatal. So if you're very immunocompromised, if you have a lot of systems that aren't functioning well, and you add another infection on top of everything that the body is trying to fight, this, you can talk about something that goes from a localized infection to spreading into the bloodstream, which is what we call bacteremia. Bacteremia can result in sepsis, and sepsis can result in death. So that sequela of, healthcare conditions can happen, and it can happen rapidly in those who are weakened and immunocompromised.
Talk to me about when you discovered that this is a problem. I mean, I feel like throughout your career, you've seen this several times, but when was it you got like frustrated at some point and you were like, something has to be solved? Can you take me to that point?
I think that, right. So I think that the continued observation of the neglect of the system in the hospital setting drove me to start to do research on my own independently. What is happening with this strain? What is existing research showing about the potential for infections related to the neglect of the system and bacteria getting intraluminally into the Foley bag. And research clearly supports that this is a problem. And in 1999, Mayo Clinic did a really landmark study that delineated the pathogenesis of catheter-associated urinary tract infections between what we refer to as extraluminal contamination and intraluminal contamination. And extraluminal contamination is a contamination that occurs early onset, maybe with poor insertion techniques and breaking sterile field, or secondary to the patient's, own skin and flora, climbing on the outside of the catheter into the urethra and causing a problem. But and this is all science, I won't get into all this, but there's a stabilization to the urethra that occurs after the insertion of the Foley catheter that then actually works as a preventative measure for extraluminal contamination. And there becomes a shift in risk. So the longer that the Foley stays in place, the more likely the patient is to get an infection caused by what we call intraluminal contamination. And the drain being an open system, that's very contributory to the bacterial burden and ultimate biofilm formation that causes a problem.
This is a huge problem. I want to, for the listeners who are not familiar with this type of device, what we're talking about is a urinary bag. So somebody that's hooked up to the machine. Can you give us like paint the picture for us?
Okay, so when a patient's unable to urinate or their urine needs to be measured accurately to determine kidney function, renal function, the catheter is placed and output is collected via the bag, and the bag is emptied at regular intervals through the time that it's indwelling in the patient. And so the drain is frequently mishandled. It's touched by dirty hands. It's touching a dirty collection container. The bag is frequently sitting on the floor. And the more that opening is manipulated, the higher the risk is for bacterial burden at that site. And very common occurrence.
So, and for the listeners, we're talking about CAUTIs, which stands for Catheter-Associated Urinary Tract Infection. Can you talk to us a little bit? What does the data tell us about their impact on the patient and outcomes, and then hospital costs?
Well, so hospital costs, so they're considered never events, and they're not reimbursed by insurance because they're not supposed to happen at all. We're supposed to take such good care of the patients that these don't occur. The average cost across the United States for a hospital acquired infection, and specifically CAUTI, is $17,700 per infection.
Wow.
That's revenue to the patient. And that is a result of antibiotic therapy for the patient, perhaps increased length of stay. Those are the two common associated costs, as well as removing the Foley and replacing it with a new. And those things just aren't covered. Even the urine culture to diagnose the problem is not covered if the CAUTI comes back positive. So overall cost to the healthcare system in the United States is approximately $350 million in lost revenues caused directly by this infection occurring with a Foley catheter placed at the time that the patient's in the hospital.
So when hospitals are losing all of this money, you said around 17,000 per patient, 13,000 per patient
per incident.
When you mentioned that, it brought me back to COVID and how many people were in the hospital during that time and how much revenue could have been lost to the hospitals due to these infections.
Well, there was definitely a spike in CAUTI incidents during COVID. And that was certainly a direct result of people who were in extremely stressful situations and understaffed situations and very sick patients.
Yeah.
And that's where you start to see this adherence to best practice and standard precautions actually decline. And I think there's been, so there was a spike in national incidence of CAUTIs during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We're hovering a little bit, and those numbers are beginning to kind of downtrend towards pre-COVID numbers, but we're not quite there. And that is because, the horse is out of the barn in terms of people continuing with practices that are risky to patients. In the name of time saving.
Were you working as a nurse during the COVID era?
I was. In fact, I was on a travel assignment in Florida at the time that COVID reared its ugly head. And it was a frightening experience to be in the hospital at that time, particularly in a system that I really wasn't acquainted with anybody. I wasn't familiar with staff or leadership. And didn't know whether to trust them or not as data and advice changed daily, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, about how we were expected to handle the threat of COVID. It wasn't fun.
Yeah. And so on top of handling the threat of COVID, were you also running back and forth trying to properly clean these catheters at the same time?
Oh, always. And it's just a step that if you're not conscientious, you're going to skip. And that results in infection. But yes.
So before your invention, walk me through how you would properly clean this device.
So there are evidence-based practices that are grouped together that collectively, when performed, reduce the risk of catheter-associated urinary tract infections. We really just refer to them as CAUTI bundles. They're bundles of evidence-based care that, when each step is followed consistently by every single nurse, there is a reflection of reduction in infections. But again, that goes back to policy versus practice and failure to practice failing the patient. So the protocol includes, most bundles of care include an alcohol prep pad cleanse to the drain before and after emptying the urine that's been collected in the bag. And so it's a manual honor system practice that is rarely performed. And it's a failed practice because, again, it doesn't matter if the person before me didn't do it or the person following me doesn't do it. My efforts are moot. It doesn't make a difference. The contamination of the drain occurs regardless of a single effort.
So you get to a point where you're like, I can't take this anymore. Something needs to happen. And you start doing research. What did you find?
So Mayo Clinic did this study determining that pathogenesis of infection. And what they determined is these intraluminal infections cause up to 34% of all catheter-associated urinary tract infections, and that they identified the drain as a very vulnerable bacterial entry point whose continuous manipulation increases the bacterial burden in that environment and then adds to the seeding of the biofilm that causes the problem. So it used to be in the day that we would separate the fully catheter tubing from the tubing of the bag, collection bag, if we needed to irrigate, sometimes collect a sample. They discovered long ago that that particular breach at that junction contributed to intraluminal infection. And so now there's a red factory seal that joins that junction, and we know pretty much that you don't separate it. Occasionally it has to happen, but rarely now. But it didn't really decrease our rates. And it did kind of initially, and then over the long term wasn't showing a lot of efficacy. And so what's left intraluminally? And it's the drain. It's the drain that can get the bacteria that can cause the contribution to the biofilm that ends up with a CAUTI. So there's a device, an analogous product out there called the Curos cap, and it is a lunar lock alcohol impregnated foam cap that screws onto the needleless hubs of central lines. And when that happens, it disinfects that lunar lock hub, and you can take it off. And when you go to push medications and access that line, you're entering, you're pushing in whatever you might need to be, whether it's IV medicine, proton, whatever it might be, push into that line. That hub is disinfected by the cap.
Yeah.
And it works really well to reduce central line infections. So that, coupled with the findings of the Mayo study, just led me to think that something can be done in a very similar style to protect and disinfect the drain of the Foley bag.
When we come back, the aha moment that launched SpigotGuard. All right, guys, have you ever wondered what it's like to enjoy a luxury cigar experience on wheels? Meet the Infinity Mobile Cigar Lounge. Founded by Tara and Quincy Tucker, this isn't your average cigar lounge. It's a 28-foot trailer transformed into a luxury haven, complete with TVs, a humidifier, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, music, and a vibe that's simply unmatched. Whether you're hosting a wedding, corporate event, or just a backyard gathering, Infinity Mobile Cigar Lounge brings the party to you. With top-notch customer service and a selection of cigars that cater to every palate, it's an experience you won't forget. Support a business that's all about family, community, and creating unforgettable moments. Visit infinitymobilecigar.com to book your event today. Infinity Mobile Cigar Lounge. Book now and elevate your next event. Let's go to the aha moment, though. So you did all of your research. You discovered this Mayo study. You found this cap that could potentially cure the infections just based on the alcohol. There's alcohol inside of the cap, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So really what I did was, I think I told you in our pre-interview, was just a very true entrepreneur story. I reached out literally on Facebook to contact somebody who might be able to help me build a prototype. I got in touch with this very young engineer who was a graduate from Purdue. He's a mechanical engineer. He was interested in helping with the project. He had contacts and a way to order prototypes, samples from China. And we just started ordering silicone parts and pieces and foam, and sitting at my table with Loctite glue and alcohol, 70% isopropyl alcohol, building a prototype that would work to fit as many circumferences of the drains that we could find, because there's a little bit of variability.
Yeah.
Until we found a solution that worked for, the top like 5 or 6 bags. And once I had that prototype and we knew it was going to work, we started reaching out to, who could actually manufacture it. We did a couple steps in the interim. We did a proof of concept test. I kept getting introduced, by the grace of God, to wonderful people who had the right skill sets to help me take that next step forward.
Right.
mom was a head and neck surgeon, and she is a PhD microbiologist. She had access to labs, and so we went in and actually cultured the internal distal portion of the drains in the ICU setting, and all of our samples came back positive for CAUTI-causing organisms right there. So we proved it was a problem. We proved it was contaminated. We proved that the 70% isopropyl alcohol pieces in the way that we implanted them into the device work to disinfect the bacteria, the 6 most common CAUTI-causing organisms. And from there, we just, kept moving forward.
How long did this entire process take before you were able to pitch it and you were finding that the results were working?
So it's really interesting because, every step of the way brings you into, as an entrepreneur, an area that you're not familiar with. And so you have to trust that you're going to have the right people come along. One of the things that we had to do before I could begin to attract investors was I had to protect my IP, right? So I had to find a great attorney who worked in intellectual property and protecting IP. And we had to perform what we call a deep dive to a freedom to operate to make sure that we weren't interfering or conflicting with existing intellectual property in the medical device market.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd come into a hard stop. We'd be infringing on somebody's patent, which we didn't want to do. So after we kind of developed our proof of concept, then we had to take that next step to make sure that if we fully launch into developing this product, that we're not stepping on anybody's toes. So we did that. And then it was from there, gathering friends and family, and then extending beyond that for people who are willing to invest in the product, in the company. And then then you build a machine and then a multi-cavity mold. And my machine builder took us through all the regulatory FDA clearances for what's needed to bring this into the hospitals. There's a lot of work. The question you asked was, how long did this take? I looked back, and the formation of my LLC was February of 2023. So it will be 3 years next month that we have really taken this basically from my head to my hands to the market and gotten through all the hurdles we needed to with machine building and multi-cavity mold and investing to be where we are.
You really took the bull by the horns, it feels like, because a lot of people that are creating a product or creating a business, it takes them years, especially with all of the compliance and FDA approvals and you think about a medical device and you're like, there's so many hoops, but 2023 was not that long ago.
It was not that long ago. I think for me, it feels like a long time because it's something that's been milling in my head for so long. It's a concept that I've had for so long. The actual work to get us to the point where we are now has really just been since February of 2023, since the formation of the LLC.
So how did you get hospitals and clinicians to listen to you and really pitch this product?
I have to say, we're still, we're still battling that. I mean, we're still working on overcoming people's sense of wonder if this actually, works. We do have a clinical study that's going on in Managua, Nicaragua, where we're studying 1,000 fully days to demonstrate efficacy. That study's not complete, but our early data is showing positive results. I mean, so much so that the hospital's buying more devices. So he's obviously working for them. They just are not willing to reveal data until the study is complete. And so we're searching right now for clinical environments. And that's where I get to talk about your dad.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful helping us in Honduras connect with a hospital system down there who has expressed an interest in studying the device with the same kind of quasi-experimental design that the Keros cap used. All we're looking for are environments where we can, because this data is collected and reported by requirement, you just actually retrospectively look at the 1,000 days prior to the device. You have a short intervention period where you train people to use the device. You have a go live date of collecting data on 1,000 Foley days, and just do this simple retrospective analysis between pre and post intervention. How is this working to protect patients? So we have the opportunity for submission for study in Honduras. I just submitted trial protocol in Pakistan.
Awesome.
Institutions there. And we have clinical sales. We have sales based on just hospital systems recognizing that this makes sense.
Yeah.
That it makes sense to do it. Some things don't need that immediate proof of efficacy if it makes sense what we're doing. And then certainly there's logic involved in what we're trying to accomplish.
Is there a reason for choosing these locations to do your clinical studies?
That all really comes about with opportunity. So my manufacturer, Dematec in Miami, Florida, although they're a U.S. company, they're primarily known for their suture line, and they have sales and distribution on 132 countries around the world. And so I travel with them to these large medical conferences in various, sectors of the globe, because we're a global product, and have an opportunity to meet people from other countries that have an interest in helping demonstrate the efficacy of the product.
You've done so much work already. Are you able to share any key data points or pilot results or outcomes that demonstrate the device's effectiveness?
So the very first study that we did under the direction of Dr. Kelly Hyatt here in Indianapolis at Community East Hospital was a safety test. We needed to take the device into the hospital setting, use it on patients to demonstrate that there were no adverse events associated with the use of the device. And that was our submission initially to the IRB, that is the approval committee for studies, to do that, which they approved. Our incidental finding along the way with the 1,000 Foley days that we collected for the purpose of safety was that we had no infections with our patients.
Wow.
The device on. Is that a publishable, manuscript? Probably not, because the intention of the study was certainly to just prove safety, but we also had 0 infections compared to, in the same unit, 1,000 Foley days without the device that had 3 infections. And so that is our earliest success that we've had. And just eager to get Managua, Nicaragua to wrap up their study and release the findings that they have down there. We have Kuwait in the Middle East, who has adopted the product. They're rolling it out to all of their ICUs right now with the intent to put it in all of their hospitals as standard of care within the next 18 months. So that's exciting. We have sales in Puerto Rico, and we've got multiple samples spread throughout the United States right now, just absolutely spreading the product with introductory samples and free evaluation tools for people to, especially CAUTI reduction teams, to evaluate how their nurses like working with the product.
What's been the feedback from the people that are using it?
So Kuwait, we did the same thing with them, and they absolutely loved it. They were willing to provide testimonials for us to put on our website, where the users, the nurses, absolutely advocated for the use of the device in their environment, and asked for it to be ordered and placed as soon as possible. They saw the immediate benefits and the compliance with the use of it. It's easy to use, and it's easy to see that it's being used. It's a bright orange cap that you can't miss. And so one look at the bag with the cap on lets you know that patient's drain is disinfected and protected between drain access.
I know that you're talking to hospital systems. When I was talking to you earlier in our initial interview, I thought about, there's just so many areas that SpigotGuard could really be such an advantage. I was thinking of like home healthcare, nursing homes, hospice, and again, for the listeners, it's this tiny little orange cap that goes at the bottom of the catheter. And so what's like the average price to use them?
So they come in a box of 100. In the United States, they're selling for $200 a box to the hospital system.
Yeah.
They do have a link available on Dematec's website for the home user. I think one of my greatest recent thrills was the fact that I was contacted by a woman in California who is a nurse at a urinary, some kind of outpatient surgical clinic. She frequently sends patients home with urinary bags, and she was having a rash and an uptick of infections. And so she called and asked for devices to be sent to her that she could send home with her patients in an effort to reduce their recurring infections. And probably 2 weeks after that happened, we got an email from a home user who has a chronic indwelling Foley talking about how this has changed his life.
Wow.
That he finds it easy to use. He finds it beneficial. He suffers generally from 6 to 7 catheter-associated infections a year, and he's confident that this is going to help him avoid those infections. And he wanted to know, as a home user, how could he purchase these for himself? So we immediately set up a link, and now the home user is available to purchase online.
Amy, that's incredible. Wait, yeah. Well, what I love so much about SpigotGuard is, like, yes, you're helping hospital systems, have better practices, and then also help with their revenue. It's basically saving their revenue. You're mitigating risk, but this is really patient centered too. Like, you're helping improve the quality of life for people.
What the best thing about the device, or one of the best things, is that it spans the continuum of care. And we talked about that, right? So the device can go from the acute care setting to rehab to long-term care and the home user. And certainly anybody who has, the longer indwelling time, the higher the risk of this intraluminal problem. And so for those patients who are chronic, like you said, long-term care, nursing homes, we're really looking forward to being involved in improving their outcomes.
Yes. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about people that are out there that have an idea similar to yours, or want to break into healthcare and create some innovative product. I want to kind of talk about your growth. Getting into hospital systems is hard. Like, how do you begin, for the people that are listening that are interested in doing something like you? How do you begin building relationships and getting leaders to take your product seriously?
So I think that there are a couple routes to getting inside a hospital system, and one is working through a large distributor, and I mean, that's on a global scale. And then there's just going direct to the hospital itself. Distributors are people who are going to buy your product and turn around and sell it. So you have to have confidence in them that they're going to be able to execute the sales portion of introducing a new product into the market. That can be tricky, and it can be complex depending on the country that you might be working with. Distributor relationships are done differently, and deals are done differently all around the world. And I'm learning that now.
Yeah.
Especially with the help of, through the help of Dematech. But I think that on the inside of the hospital system, what everybody wants to just know is, does this work, right? Does this work? Show me even a conversation with somebody else who is in infection prevention or on a CAUTI prevention team from another hospital. The leadership gets smaller and smaller as you climb to the top when it comes to solving these problems. And positive experiences in hospital systems will spread to other hospital systems. But we definitely need at least one completed study that says, yes, we reduce infection rates. That's what we're going towards now.
I love that. What advice do you have for clinicians or early stage founders who want to introduce an innovation to a large organization?
I think having great sales contacts. I mean, the best thing that came along to us in the States was that Michael Link and then the New Endeavors team underneath them, who have vast and deep connections within the hospital systems. And wide, including your dad. So it's been a pleasure to work with them, and they've been very effective at taking this product on and using social media and YouTube videos and reaching out to the people that they know well to get their ear and say, hey, you need to hear about this. And that's worked well for us. Like I said, we've got samples in many institutions in their hands for evaluation. We actually have Infirmary Health in Alabama who's willing to do a clinical study on the device, also using a resident there. So we've got great opportunity coming up. We've got a lot of momentum moving into 2026, and we're really fortunate.
Yeah. And my last question, just as to inspire others to kind of go out and find their bright ideas as well, is like, this is your background. You've been a nurse for years, but what sort of partnerships and mentors did you seek when you, and when you were founding this company, and like what significant role did they play in SpigotGuard's early growth?
I think that my partnership with Dematech was key. I had some connections with a doctor who steered me in the right direction with working with a great attorney to secure my IP
Mm-hmm.
and my patent protection. And then from there, my relationship with Dematech, my manufacturer, because of their global distribution channels and connections, has been instrumental in moving things forward. To remember that my device, we've only been fully operational and since the end of May of this 2025.
Wow.
So it's a very brief period of time. We're at full capacity to produce devices at the end of May. And by July, we were engaged with Managua, Nicaragua, and Hospital Militar, beginning our study down there. So it's just things that take a matter of time for data collection and completion of a white paper. So I would say, surround yourself with great people. A lot of it, I would say it's not luck, it's God. You hear that a lot from people. It really isn't luck. It's God bringing these people into your life and expressing gratitude and finding the best people that you can surround yourself with to fill the voids of knowledge that you don't have.
Yes.
Is key. Yeah.
Yeah. Has this been, they always talk about entrepreneurship being, they meaning people, say that entrepreneurship is very lonely. Have you felt that like in your experience at all? Or it sounds like you've had a good team behind you.
Well, I'm building a team. You start by yourself. And so a lot of conversations that you have to have with yourself to pick yourself up off the floor
For
and
sure.
you're doing the right thing. I can't tell you the number of times I've been up in the middle of the night researching CAUTIs and making sure that I've all my evidence research that I've, located online is really truly reinforcing the decision that I made to move forward with this product. So it is lonely. And for me in this instance, it's really unique because my device is made in Miami. So, I don't see my manufacturing. I'm not surrounded by that environment. I have to fly down there to see it. And so I am just, working out of a home office in the interim, and in between these conferences, by myself. So it is lonely and it's risky and it can be scary, but you have to those are the times where you just have to have faith.
Yeah. Well, you've created such a great product, and the fact that you launched this in 2023 and you've only been out since May, and you're building this like sales team, and you're doing clinical studies in other countries. It's just like from the outside looking in, you're killing it. So I'm really inspired by you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. I'm going to take those words to bed tonight when I put my head on the pillow.
You should.
That.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, but again, I'm very fortunate and I've worked with incredible people and I've met incredible people along my journey that I feel like I have friends all over the world now from the places that I've traveled that he's one of you are wanting to help other people. I think I told you about the Medica conference that I went to in November and how, if you can imagine, 17 empty Kmart sized buildings linked together and each of them filled with medical devices that have been designed to help other humans.
Wow.
And it's an entire event of humans helping humans, from seeing, desktop laboratories that can spin out results immediately to exoskeletons that are being circulated and walked around that actually help, paraplegics walk again. And it's incredibly inspiring to be surrounded by that kind of effort, humans helping humans. And it was very poignant to me as I left my last day in Dusseldorf, Germany. So I feel very fortunate to be where I am.
No, that's so cool. I want to go into your business evolution and your future vision, but you talked a little bit about this, but how has SpigotGuard grown since its launch?
Oh my gosh. So, the fact that we've just taken a prototype and gotten it through regulatory, we're an FDA class 2, 510K exempt product. So, the fact that we have gotten there, that we have fully operational, automated machine capabilities to produce, thousands and thousands of caps a year is, to me, those are the kinds of things that really represent growth. And now the other, growth piece is that we're finally getting revenue, right? So I'm getting revenue from Nicaragua, getting revenue from Kuwait, getting revenue from Puerto Rico. And those are the things that are meaningful steps that let you know as a founder, things are moving in the right direction. We have, and I don't know if your dad told you, if he's knew this, but we have an invitation to go out to the VA. We're pitching in Maryland to the VA system in 2 weeks from today.
Wow.
And it's just my pleasure to be working with Michael Link and the New Endeavors team to put together an incredible presentation for OpMed and the highest military physician leadership that our country has to introduce them to this product. It's really going to be an amazing event. I'm looking forward.
So cool. Where do you see your company and yourself in like 5 years? Have you thought about that?
Well, so yes, I have, because when I built my slide deck and formulated the funding for the company, very much saw a exit strategy that involved a strategic buyout. So I want to get this up and running. I want to demonstrate efficacy. My goal is to have this become the global standard of care for the urine collection bag, the bags that we fit. And then sell the company to somebody that can take over and really grow it to its global potential.
So you want to sell the company.
I do. I don't see myself running this. I see my role as an inventor more than somebody who's a business owner. If that makes sense. The inventing portion of it is much more interesting to me and compelling than it is to the business side of running things. Like I said, about more for the wonderful people that I had, that would be such a challenge for me. So I invented another product. I don't know if I told you about that when we spoke. I've invented another product that I have a patent on that in fact, my own hospital just bought.
I love that.
First units have arrived to them. They should be implementing next week. So it's a patient safety device as well that's designed to create a safer patient experience. Am I allowed to talk about this? Or
yes, absolutely. It's
an enormous problem in the acute care setting that when patients get out of the bed to sit in a chair as part of just their daily physical therapy, being up and out of bed to promote healing, that they can't reach their call light. The call light is a device that is on a limited cord, and it's very slippery, and there's no place designed to put it. And so what happens is it falls on the floor or it ends up out of reach, and it contributes significantly to falls because a patient unable to reach help will end up just independently ambulating to the bathroom regardless of the risk. And so they fall. And so what I invented was this device that it's called a Care Caddy Plus, and it's a plastic 3-piece device that is a caddy or a cradle for the call light. It fits on the sleeve of the recliner of the patient chair. It's fully reversible, so it can go to either side of the chair, but the call light actually is seated into the caddy so that it's standardizing for the first time ever the location of the call light, which falls. So that was another fun product that I thought about for a long time, and just saw the way that now that I did SpigotGuard, that I could take this from my head to my hand to production, using Damatech as well as the manufacturer for that. But in addition, and you can cut all this stuff out of here if you don't want to put this in there, but
no, this is wonderful.
The sides of it that snap together to the top, they have pre-drilled holes in them. And so now for the first time when the patient's actually up out of the bed, we have a place to hang a Foley catheter. Once again, about reducing infection risk so that it sits below the patient bladder, but off the floor, which is the standard of care for the bag. So we're excited.
Well, what I love so much about what you just shared is that you don't have to be an entrepreneur that create something and that this is like your end all be all. You're saying that you are more of a inventor and an innovator, and you're creating a product with the idea to help people, but then sell it to somebody who could then run it and be the CEO and do all of the operations. And I think that for the people that are listening and thinking about entrepreneurship is that you don't have to start from scratch, but you also don't have to buy into a business that's already running either. There's space for everybody within entrepreneurship.
I think so too. I think, right, if you really enjoy innovation and creation and solutions, solving problems, creating solutions to problems that are simple. Like the CAUTI is very simple, but is extremely needed. Yeah. And that's why I went ahead and did it. And I don't know, that might be a different company for me. I may end up keeping that one myself. Yeah. It doesn't seem as overwhelming as SpigotGuard does. Yeah. It's more for an advanced healthcare system. And so we kind of have the US market and other, Australia and the EU and some other markets. But, yeah, it's just, I like inventing and creating the most.
This is awesome. You're so cool, Amy. I love it. You are. I
love that.
Yeah, no, this is so awesome. Where can people find you and how can they support SpigotGuard?
Wow. Okay. So our website is just www.SpigotGuard.com. I am amy.huser at SpigotGuard.com. And either one of those ways can link you to finding me or finding more information out about the product. I have to just give a plug that if anybody in the infection prevention space is listening to this, we do, have a program where we can provide free samples for evaluation and then an evaluation tool in the environment to explore whether or not this is something you think fits your CAUTI reduction, program.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. I'll be sure to put all of your information in the description so people can reach out to you. But is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would love to add while I have you?
I don't think so. I appreciate your time and the opportunity for me to kind of explain the story of what I've gone through. I certainly would be willing to assist anybody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, particularly within the healthcare system, to provide guidance of what I've experienced and maybe pitfalls to avoid. And there's really for me only just, honestly, just been a few, but that's to be expected, and we navigated and haven't had to do any big pivots. So it's really at this point, full steam ahead.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. You are the first innovator in medicine that I've had on the show. And so this has just been an honor. And I know that so many people, not just people that work in the hospital systems, but people who may have experienced an infection while being treated in a hospital can really resonate with your story. And so I can't wait for people to hear it. It's going to be great.
Thank you. It's been a complete pleasure, Amber. Tell your dad hello.
I will. He will be listening. He's so excited for this one to come out. So thank you. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea Podcast. This week's episode featured Amy Huser, founder of SpigotGuard. If you would like to learn more about SpigotGuard, you can go to their website at SpigotGuard.com. You can also connect with Amy directly on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring on more stories like Amy's. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for updates, and if there's a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from next, drop us a message. If you would like to support our show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at A Bright Idea Podcast. This episode was edited by Quincy Tucker. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.